Welcome to Civitas LA, where we feature diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. Each week, we hear from, learn from, and are inspired by a new generation of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making Los Angeles a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. Now, more than ever, we aim to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across the greater Los Angeles region and the world while elevating diverse and emerging voices in this civic conversation. You know, the media is a big topic these days, and the role and importance of media. And today's discussion centers on the role and importance of community radio and its role in building, serving, and informing community. So I'm going to start by referencing a paper that forms the foundation for this conversation, and this was published by the Society for International Development entitled Community Radio for Change and Development. In it, it outlines several main functions of community radio, that being A, to reflect and promote local identity, culture, and character, to create a diversity of voices and opinions, to encourage open dialogue and democratic process, to promote social change and development, and to promote good governance in civil society. So that's a lot right there for community radio and its role. For 55 years here in our region, KJLH Radio has been providing these functions as one of only 2 Black-owned and operated commercial radio stations in the state of California. With us today, calling in, we are delighted to welcome Karen Slade, Vice President and General Manager of KJLH. We're looking forward to discussing the storied history of this great radio station, hear from Karen about the work of the station and how it's evolving in this rapidly changing times, and also discussing the ongoing critical role that community radio plays in fostering community in a democratic society. Karen, welcome to Civitas LA.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, we're excited to have you here. Really excited about this conversation. Karen, we always like to start our podcast with a short background on our guest. So share with us your journey prior to your getting to KJLH Radio.
Well, it started at Kent State University. I got my undergrad, my BS in telecommunications, which was the broadcast journalism of its day. And while there, I experimented with a host of different things, but I ended up with a program called Family Tree, which was a broadcasting cable program that taught students everything from audio and lighting to hosting, producing, and directing. So that I got a taste of media and I loved it. And I went on to do an internship with a NBC affiliate in Cleveland, WKYC. Upon graduating, I could not get a job.
Oh,
In
wow.
media, nowhere. So Xerox at the same time had an initiative. They were looking for African Americans to hire and bring into the company. So I interviewed, was hired, and had a really good, thorough training and understanding of sales and marketing, hardware actually. So Xerox was a great place, but it got me so far away from my original love, which was broadcasting.
And how long had you been at KJLH, and how did you find your way there, or how did they find you?
Well, I've been here over 30 years. When I left Xerox, I thought, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to corporate America. And I love media, so I said, I'll give it 5 years and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Well, it worked. It didn't quite work out that way. Steve at the time did not have a general manager at the station, and I had worked for Xerox in LA prior to being in Atlanta. And he offered me the job. When I found out he was serious, I had to really think. And I said, yes, I jumped at it.
Okay.
Because, again, I could always go back to corporate America, and now I'm back with my first love. As much as I valued my experience at Xerox, there was something missing.
Sure.
It wasn't quite satisfying or fulfilling. And this was an opportunity of a lifetime, and I leaped at it.
Mm-hmm. And 30 years later, here you are. So thank you. I appreciate that. You know, Karen, KJLH is the oldest Black-owned radio station on the West Coast and one of only 2 in the entire state of California, which is really shocking to me. Give us an overview of the station, its format, and give us a brief history of the station.
Well, KJLH has a really interesting story behind it, and I won't go through all the details, but I will say it came about as KJLH in the 60s. It began as K Fox out of Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And John Lamar Hill, African American businessman at the time, with all the civil unrest and the riots of 65 in LA, he took it upon himself to determine that there needed to be a black owned and operated radio station. Of course, at the time it was Negro.
Right.
But,
How names change over the years.
exactly. So he went through a lot of shenanigans to get K Fox and get it licensed to the city of Compton and get it changed from Long Beach to Dominguez Hills on to Baldwin Hills.
Okay.
And from there, he loved it, but his primary business was a funeral
Right.
business. So after about 14 years, he had to make a decision what he wanted to do, and he decided he had had enough fun with KJLH. It was a hobby,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be lucrative, and so he was looking for someone to sell it to. He had several offers, but he thought, who would really carry on the legacy that I want for KJLH? And he sold it to Stevie Wonder in 1979.
That's amazing. So you've celebrated, 50 years now. How's the station evolved? Who has it served? And how's the format evolved over those years?
Well, still African American oriented. However, when John Lamar Hill owned it in the 60s and 70s, it was kind of a Nat King Cole jazz
Mm-hmm.
fusion kind of station. And when Steve bought it, it was straight R&B.
Okay.
One thing you will note that was consistent throughout with John Lamar Hill, it was known as kindness, joy, love, and happiness.
Right.
And he came up with the kindness, joy, love, and happiness to solidify the KJLH because there was so much confusion with KGFJ,
Oh, okay. Okay.
the call letters, even though it sounds nicer just to say kindness, joy, love, and happiness.
Right. Which we love. We love those words for sure.
More now than ever before.
Absolutely.
And Steve came in and brought in We Are You. So it was comparable but more contemporary for the 70s and 80s.
And when you have such a legendary artist, such as Stevie Wonder, owning the station, how has that impacted the station, its goals and objectives, and formats and formulas for success?
Oh, he's a music lover. I mean, aside from being an artist, he really loves music. It feeds his soul. He's a creative being. And all that is good, but I'm a business oriented person. So as odd as it may sound, we get along fabulously because his main interest is in the music, the sound of the station, and what efforts we do, what outreach we do. And I focus a lot of my attention on making sure the bills are paid and HR is good and the FCC licensing is intact. So we work well together because we complement one another. And I don't try to pick music.
And so I assume he's been an active owner, if I can ask. He's been an active owner?
Oh, very much so. If you look at KJLH, you'll hear on Sundays we have church programming and gospel programming. The gospel is one of Steve's ideas. It started with Spread the Word. It was an hour program to transition from churches to the Sunday afternoon. And now it's 25 years later, and we have 6 hours of inspiration on Sundays. We have world music on Saturdays because he's a citizen of the world. So he does impact the station. It has we try to remain contemporary, but his breadth of music is larger than a traditional R&B format.
Mm-hmm. No, that's terrific. And certainly, community radio gives voice to that local region, and giving voice to the African American community has been a critical role played by KJLH, especially during the '92 riots. How has the station responded this year when we've had pandemic, social justice protests? We've got an election year upon us. We've got just so much going on. And how is the station adapting to all of these changing currents?
2020 has been challenging on all fronts. I must say, from business to the pandemic to the social unrest to the political climate, and we're talking local, state, federal. It's more challenging than anything I've ever experienced, including the 92 civil unrest. We were coming out of the primaries, so we were feeling pretty good about the balance of 2020 when COVID hit, and it kind of turned us upside down because most of our retail businesses were closing. We had to depend on agency business, which is not our strong suit, being a small station. And we had to upgrade our technical expertise so that people could continue to work from home. So I must admit, Team KJLH really stepped up. My engineering stepped up, and we didn't miss a beat. So we have survived. I won't say we've thrived, but we have survived. And from a programming standpoint, still trying to address the community needs through the civil unrest. And in addition to COVID, we expanded our public affairs programming. So we have a talk show called Front Page. We do 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We added a Saturday session for 2 hours, 8 to 10. And during that session, it started strictly for COVID. So we were looking at prevention, treatment, from the scientific perspective, from the medical perspective, political perspective. So we really looked at COVID, and then it just expanded. It kind of morphed into sports. How is the pandemic impacting sports, the way it's being conducted, to education, distance learning, how that's affecting teachers and students in LAUSD. You name it, we have expanded, and thankfully people have come in and the experts have been there to speak directly to our audience. So we've tried to stay on top of all the issues that affect our community locally, and that's on the public affairs side. And then on the music side, sometimes you just got to unwind.
Sure.
So we started doing a quarantine concert series at night at 9 a.m. and we feature artists in their live concerts that we just put on air. So we try to give you news, information, and a little bit of fun.
There's so much angst and anxiety during the day. You've got to unwind at night for sure.
Exactly.
So tell me, how do you view social responsibility role of community radio stations, and how is KJLH, meeting this moment?
If I can speak for all of Team KJLH, I believe it's our privilege to be there for the community, to give voice to the concerns of the community, to allow them to vent their frustrations and their fears or concerns and find ways to address them via our medium. I think that is the beauty of community radio. You're actively participating. It's live and it's local and it's present.
Let's talk about the media landscape, because I know you started in media, went to corporate, now been at KJLH. Technology transformation has certainly enabled more and more people to stream shows, listening to podcasts on laptops, iPads, mobile. So much content out there, so many different and new platforms out there. So how is independently owned community radios? How is it still relevant, and how are you adapting to meet the listener where they are?
Well, I still believe content is king or queen, if you'll bear with me.
Sure.
I just think that if you give people what they want, they will tune in, regardless of the platform. Now, that being said, we set up our initial website in 94.
Okay.
We started streaming in 99. We set up an app, I think it was 2016, and we started podcasting in 2018. So we do try to stay on top of the technical trends, the smart speakers,
Right.
because we want to make sure our content is wherever the listener is. If it's in the palm of their hand, in their home with their smart speaker, we want them to be able to access our content. And I see it as a natural extension, a compatible extension of our content delivery system. So I don't resist it at all. Some of the old timers did, but it is an expensive venture. It costs more to put your content on those platforms in some respects.
Sure. There seems to be a generational divide in radio listenership and potentially even civic engagement as we see. And one of the things we try to foster is people to engage in the democratic process. How are you aiming to connect with these new audiences, new generations, and what are some of the programs that you all are instituting or have underway to get music to bridge and connect generations?
Well, you've hit the question right on the head. That's the challenge of our day, more so than the technology, and is the content bridging that gap. We how do you satisfy a baby boomer and a millennial
Right.
with content? The interests are different, the where they are in their lifespan is different. So it is really a challenge, but I do believe music can cross so many barriers. It can speak to us when words are insufficient. It can speak to our soul. So if we can select the right blend of music to keep all entertained, informed, inspired, that's the challenge.
I'm glad that we hit on and stumbled upon a great question. I just certainly don't have the answer because, I will readily admit that I've seen Diana Ross at the Hollywood Bowl probably 5 times in the last dozen years. So I'm still not giving up on that generation yet, and that's what I'm going to stick with Diana till the bitter end.
I know. Well, I'm sticking with Stevie, so okay.
Okay. Although I'm a big fan of her, and I love Snow Allegra these days. So I'm getting into the newer generation. Let's talk a little bit about Inglewood, since I know some years ago KJLH was in the Crenshaw district of South Los Angeles, and then you were licensed over in Compton, but the station some years ago moved to Inglewood. So this is also the second of a three-part conversation that we're having also around just the dynamic changes happening in the city of Inglewood. Tell us about your move into Inglewood and what precipitated that move.
Well, of course, John Lamar Hill owned the building that we were in. So when
Okay.
Steve bought the license, he did not buy the facility. So by this time, John Lamar Hill the third is in operation. The senior John Lamar, or John Lamar the second, had retired and subsequently uh, passed on. John, I'll call him John Jr., but it's really the third, asked us to move. He needed the space.
Okay.
He had his cars and what have you out in the open, and he wanted to build it out. So he gave us about 6 months to find a new location, and I was looking at real estate. And then I got a call one day from Willie Davis, the owner of All Pro Broadcasting, former football great.
Okay.
He had sold KACE to Cox Broadcasting. So he had a perfect facility, broadcast ready, and he took me to lunch, and on a handshake, I had a deal. No
Excellent.
lease, no contract, and we moved over one weekend in November of 1994, and we subsequently bought the building in 99.
And I know, so you've seen a lot transpire, and certainly these last 5 years, it's Inglewood's been on fire, and there's been obviously some people are benefiting greatly, others are not, and it's lots of conversation, shall we say, going on in Inglewood. How are you viewing what's happening in Inglewood, and how is that impacting your work actually?
Well, I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm happy for the residents. I think the tax infusion into the city will benefit all. How it will benefit KJLH is still up in the air. We've acted more as a part of the media PR outreach of the organizations, but we've not been able to make any tangible inroads, and
Hmm.
we've got no ad dollars. So I'm guardedly optimistic that we'll be able to participate, if not in part of their advertising campaign, perhaps in their community outreach.
That's great, and we'll certainly look forward to following that. Karen, in closing, we've been around 55 years now, KJLH Radio. What's been the key to the success of the station, and what do you see the future as being for the station as well as community radio in Inglewood in the coming years?
I think community radio will always have a place as long as it stays relevant and in touch. I think sometimes the companies get so big they get out of touch with their customer base, if you will, their
Hmm.
listeners.
Right.
So if we can continue to hire from the community, be involved in the community, things of interest to the community, I think that relevancy will be key. It will be a challenge because, our commercial community radio station lives on its advertising dollars or its
Right.
income. So without that, it will always be a challenge. But the it does serve a purpose, and I think that purpose will be ongoing because the community will always need an outlet and need a voice.
No, I appreciate that. By the way, how large is the team at KJLH?
Well, we've downsized quite a bit over the years. We're about 35 full time.
No, that's great. So, Karen, we always speak to, you've got a number of programs and services to engage community. And one of the things we like to talk about also is about partnerships and collaboration. So how can others, get involved in the work of KJLH in Inglewood or in the communities that you serve? And how do people find KJLH?
Well, you can always tune in to 102.3 FM. We're very vocal and we'll tell you what's happening. You can also go to our website, KJLHradio.com. We do quite a few things. This year, it's been virtual more so than on site, but we have a lot of opportunities for the community to get involved and volunteer and help us out. In the past, many of the Greek organizations have supported us. The AKAs, the Deltas, what have you, have been very helpful in many of our community outreach programs.
No, that's terrific, and we'll certainly post that in the show notes when the episode's released as well. So that's great. We really appreciate this conversation. We're really excited about the work that you do and applaud you and your team, and we look forward to listening in to the smooth jazz of KJLH, which is another format that I love as well. But before you leave, we always like to wind down with a lightning round. And this is where we ask, these busy civic leaders like yourselves to give us a sense, insight look at your Los Angeles, or in this case, your Inglewood, and share with us a few tidbits. So if you don't mind indulging us for a few lightning round questions.
Okay.
Where are you from originally?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Which neighborhood do you live in currently?
Baldwin Hills.
Mobility is a huge question always. How do you get around? Uber, Lyft, yellow cab, bike, bus, walk, metro, or scooter?
Well, I walk quite a bit, but I'll say Uber.
Okay. Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, or Hulu?
Netflix.
Favorite restaurant in Los Angeles or favorite restaurant in Inglewood?
I would say Javier's is just my all-time favorite, but Truxton's in Inglewood is very good.
Okay. Favorite spot to take a visitor to Los Angeles or into Inglewood?
The beach. I love the beach. I'm from Cleveland. Every chance I get, I go to the beach.
But there's a lake there.
Yeah, but it's
With a
not
little bit
the
of
same.
sand around the edge. Lakers or Clippers?
Lakers.
Rams or Chargers?
Rams.
Favorite park in Los Angeles or favorite park in Inglewood?
I'll say Ash Park. I go there and play tennis. It's a small community park, but it's well kept, well maintained, and we have fun there every Saturday.
Oh, excellent. Bruins or Trojans?
Trojans.
Okay. Karen, this is great. Karen, this has been a great dialogue, and we appreciate your time, and we appreciate all that you do and your service to community. Hopefully we can have you on again and discuss the progress that you're making. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us and letting me talk about KJLH.
I appreciate that. And thank you to Community Build, proud sponsor of Civitas LA. Thank you for your ongoing support of this work. To learn more about Community Build, visit communitybuild.org. And to our audience, thank you again for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you'll join us next week as we look forward to another great conversation with another dynamic leader moving Inglewood forward. So again, until we meet again, stay strong and get involved. To learn more about Civitas LA and share feedback on this program, or if you have a recommendation about future programs, please visit our website at www.civitasla.com. And we hope you'll connect with us on Facebook at Civitas LA, Instagram at Civitas_LA, and Twitter at Civitas_LA.